Very quickly, let's play a little game. I'm going to say a word and you comment below the first thing that comes to your mind when I say this word, okay? No cheating, just the first thing that comes to your mind, even if it sounds crazy. The word is witches. Go ahead and comment whatever word came to your mind. So let me take a few guesses. You probably thought of Hocus Pocus, the Wicked Witch of the West. You probably thought of me, or you probably thought of the Salem witch trials, which is a story I have not yet covered because I felt like that was a bunch of hocus pocus in order to make a mockery of witches and not address the true origin of magic, where and who it stems from, until I learned the catalyst of the Salem witch trials was an enslaved woman by the name of Tuba, or some may refer to her as Tuba. There's different pronunciations, so I'll go back and forth throughout the video. Tuba. I'll probably say Tuba. That rolls off a little easier. Tuba. And Tuba was accused of using witchcraft, or should I say, she was beaten into confessing she was using witchcraft, which added on to the stereotypes of lack of education on spirituality, which made everyone believe the town was attacked by witches. Tuba was an enslaved woman of the South American Indian and African descent, owned by Samuel Parris of Salem, Massachusetts, a wealthy business owner who inherited a sugar plantation in Barbados. Tuba's exact origins are not clear because, of course, there was lack of documentation or not proper documentation of slaves back then. We only knew their owner and that's it, but she is often believed to have come from Barbados, where Parris, her current owner, had a plantation before moving to Massachusetts, Lord. Samuel Parris brought Tuba in Barbados as a teenager, where she had been enslaved since her childhood. While in Massachusetts and the property of Samuel, Tuba was entrusted with the care of his 9-year-old daughter Betty and his 11-year-old niece Abigail Williams. Now, in January 1692, the two girls became mysteriously ill after playing a fortune-telling game that involved dropping an egg white into a glass of water. It was thought the form the egg white took could predict whom the girls would marry and show the shapes of their future lives. The fortune-telling game with the egg white, known as molybdomancy or omancy, was a form of divination practiced in colonial New England, including Salem at this time. This game involved interpreting the shapes and patterns formed by egg whites dropped into water. So to prepare for this, you take a clear container of water, usually in a glass bowl or a glass cup. An egg is cracked and the egg white is separated from the yolk. Now, the divination process is the egg white is carefully dropped into the water. So as the egg white settles and begins to coagulate, it forms various shapes and patterns. The shapes formed by the egg white are then interpreted to predict the future or gain insight. Different shapes were believed to symbolize different things, such as letters, objects, or symbols that could be interpreted to provide answers to specific questions or predict future events. So in this case, the girls, Samuel's daughter Betty and his niece Abigail, wanted to see who they were going to marry. But after seeing a coffin in one of the glasses, they began to bark like dogs and cry hysterically. So immediately, Samuel contacted the local doctor, which was Dr. William Giggs, to see what was going on with his niece and his daughter. Dr. Giggs was unable to find a physical or medical explanation for their symptoms. When faced with their strange and seemingly implicable behaviors, fits, convulsions, screaming, and contortions, he declared that they were suffering from the evil hand, or witchcraft. Now, I was wondering, where did he get this witchcraft word from this early on? Why was this just a sign, especially by a doctor? So Puritan society in New England was deeply religious and held strong beliefs in the supernatural, including the existence of witches and the devil. These beliefs were rooted in their interpretation of the Bible and influenced by European witchcraft lore. Mixing with the lack of knowledge and technology at the time in the medical field, when they encountered new or unexplained sicknesses or behaviors, they took it as evidence of the devil's work in witchcraft, because if the doctor doesn't know what's going on, it must be witchcraft. So the doctor not only placed the blame on witchcraft, but it was witchcraft to punish Samuel Parris and his family. In an attempt to help, although she did not have anything to do with the girls trying to fortune tell, so Tuba took her concerns to the church and asked for help. She took one of the members' recommendations to bake a witch cake to reveal the identity of the tormentor. She mixed the girls' urine with rye meal to make a small cake, and it was fed to them. Some stories share that she fed it to the girls. Other stories share that she fed it to the dog. The girls, in return, likely looking for the easiest target, claimed Tuba was the witch that made them sick. So I feel like right here is the perfect moment for a little known Black history fact in my Tom Joyner voice. But this is information that we all know, that during this era of slavery, enslaved people were frequently blamed for a variety of offenses, including theft, witchcraft, and assault. This was all part of a broader strategy to justify the brutal system of slavery and to maintain strict control over the enslaved population. They were accused of theft. Enslaved individuals were often accused of stealing, usually items belonging to their owners or other people on the plantation. These accusations served multiple purposes. They reinforced the idea that enslaved people were inherently dishonest and needed strict oversight, and they also provided a pretext of a severe punishment. In many cases, what was considered theft might have been acts of survival, such as taking food or other necessities, if the theft even occurred in the first place. And as in this story, we see witchcraft accusations. They were less common than accusations of theft or assault, but they still did occur. Such accusations were often rooted in deep-seated fears of superstitions held by the enslavers. Enslaved individuals accused of witchcraft were often those who practiced traditional African religions or healing practices. These accusations could lead to extreme punishment and were used to suppress cultural practices that might unify or empower the enslaved population, and to unify them to all practice Christianity or the belief of their owner, which is why I wanted to cover it here, because I feel like this is a mindset that a lot of people maintain when they consider spirituality or African practices that we all did once upon a time as evil, just because they were trained to do so, and that training was passed down generation to generation. And throughout this story too, we are going to learn about how enslaved people were frequently accused of assault, often with little to no evidence. These charges could stem from a real or imagined conflicts between enslaved people and their owners, overseas, or other white individuals. Threat of assault was exaggerated to justify harsh disciplinary measures and to instill fear in the white population. Enslaved individuals accused of assault faced brutal consequences, including whipping, imprisonment, or even death. In all these cases, the underlying goal was to maintain control and justify the oppressive system of slavery. The legal and social systems were heavily biased against enslaved people because they were considered property, leaving them with little to no resources for help or assistance when they are accused of these false or exaggerated accusations. These accusations also served to dehumanize the enslaved people, portraying them as inherently criminal and dangerous, justifying their actions to keep them under control and keep them as slaves, even though we all have learned that that is, of course, untrue. But I wanted to add this part in there because I know I mentioned that I felt like the girls were faking, just because this is a common theme back in the day of let's cause a show and get some attention and blame it on the slaves, and then we'll never face punishment for what we did because they're going to take out their anger and frustration on the slaves. So that's why I mentioned I felt like the girls were faking, just because Rosewood, we're all familiar with that, correct? And as I stated before, Tuba was purchased from Barbados, so with her being from the island, it did not add on her innocence with this whole witchcraft claim. They were like, them island people, you know how they do witchcraft, you got to teach them right, take them to church so they could learn about Jesus Christ. So that her origins did not help her in this case. Now in the story where Tuba fed the cake to the girls, it stated that Samuel, who already begun praying and fasting in an attempt to cure the girls of what he saw as demonic possession, became angered when he heard Tuba had fed them the witch's cake. Now you may be wondering, what in the world is a witch cake? Why was there urine in it? Because I was wondering the same thing, because I never heard of it. So the witch cake was a type of Puritan or European folk remedy associated with witchcraft hysteria, used to identify the person responsible for the girl's affliction. So let's go over some of the ingredients. Rye meal. This was a common grain used in baking and was believed to hold mystical properties and folk remedies. It formed the base of the cake. Now the urine. So for the urine, it was shared that the urine would create a connection between the girls and the cake, basically having some type of DNA. And when the cake was fed to a dog, the witch responsible for the afflictions would be revealed through the dog's behavior. Some cases the dog may attack the person or be able to sniff them out. Now in the story where Tuba fed the witch cake to the dog, it's not documented how the dog reacted, which I feel like it's not documented because the girls were faking all along and the dog just didn't have a reaction. But that doesn't add to the story to create more hysteria, so they didn't share that part. So they said, yeah, she fed it to the girls. But anywho, when Tuba was asked did she have any involvement in the girls' behavior, she said, I know them at all, in her Bayesian accent. That was my attempt at a Bayesian accent. Tuba denied any practice of witchcraft or intention to hurt the girls, but it wasn't enough to convince the Paris family or people of Salem that she was innocent. And as a black slave, her word meant nothing in proving her innocence in general. In the same year, 1692, Tuba was accused of witchcraft, marking her as a catalyst of the infamous Salem witch trials and making her the first person, or the first slave in this case, to confess to being a witch. Now you may be wondering, how in the world did she say she didn't have anything to do with it, but now all of a sudden she's confessing to it? Yes, Tuba later did confess to being a witch, not because she actually put witchcraft on the girls, but she was beaten by her owner Samuel Paris into confessing. I feel like I've been calling Samuel Salem. If I have said that this entire time, I meant Samuel Paris, not Salem. His name is Samuel, tongue tie. Tuba did confess and embellished her confession with an embroidered tale of how she had been told to serve the devil. So I guess she said, if I'm gonna confess, I'm gonna make it worth y'all while. In her confession, she stated that her and the girls rode on sticks and a black dog told her to hurt the children after she was forced by the devil to serve him. This confession, as elaborate and confusing as it is, this sparked hysteria in Salem. They were already believing witches was floating around, so even though she's just sitting up there telling lies, they were like, yep, that makes sense, because they already had that belief in their head. Tuba was formally accused of witchcraft, and 2 other women were accused and arrested along with her, one being Sarah Good. She was a beggar who was looked down upon by the town for her financial instability and her debts. And the other woman arrested was Sarah Osborne, who lived on Salem's margins. She was involved in a dispute with her children over their dead father's estate and was revealed to have an affair with an indentured servant. All 3 women were perfect targets for accusations of defiant, even evil behavior. Tuba's confession did not start the Salem witch trials, but it played a crucial role in escalating the hysteria and accusations that eventually led to the trials. Before Tuba's confession, there were already rumors and suspicions of witchcraft circulating in Salem's village. The afflictions of the young girls, including fits, convulsions, and strange behavior, had sparked concern and fear in the community. Tuba, an enslaved woman in the household of Reverend Samuel Paris, was one of the first accused of practicing witchcraft. Tuba's confession validated the fears and suspicion of witchcraft in Salem village. It provided a narrative that explained the implicable behaviors of the afflicted girls and provided a target for the community's anxiety. Following Tuba's confession, accusations of witchcraft multiplied rapidly. Other individuals, mostly women, but also some men, were accused based on unreliable evidence, testimonies that their spirits or specters were seen engaging in witchcraft. The accusation and hysteria led to the establishment of a special court to handle witchcraft cases. This court, known as the Court of Oyer in Terminer, presided over trials that resulted in the execution of 20 people and the imprisonment of many others. Salem witch trials occurred in a deeply religious and superstitious society where beliefs in the supernatural and the devil's influence were widespread. Tuba's confession, however ridiculous it sounded, fit into the beliefs and reinforced the community's fears, and it was all too easy to scapegoat people of color and marginal members of society. Now, a summary of the Salem witch trials. What did this all lead to? Starting with the actual trials. The trials began in May 1692, overseen by a special court of Oyer in Terminer. Notable figures included Judges Samuel Sewall, William Stoughton, and John Hawthorne. The accused were often subject to harsh interrogation and public scrutiny. Lack of evidence from people witnessing people engaging in witchcraft and committing witchcraft were frequently used. So someone could just run up to a judge or a police officer or whoever was an official at the time and be like, I saw them planting seeds, I think that was witchcraft. Or they were acting funny in the morning, I think that was witchcraft. And they would have to go to court to prove that they're not a witch. However you may prove that in a town where everyone thinks that witches are just flying around on brooms and taking over people's spirits. So going into the executions, 20 people were executed, 19 by hanging and 1, Gills Corey, by pressing with heavy stones. Many others were imprisoned and some died in custody. The majority of the accused were women, though men were also implicated as well. The Salem witch trials ended September 1692. Public opinion began to turn against the trials. I guess once they realized, like, okay, y'all starting to say too many people are witches and y'all just going up there and using it as blackmail, like, oh, you're not gonna give me what I want, well, guess what, I'm gonna go tell them you're a witch, and then they're actually being executed because you ran and said that they're a witch. Doubts about validity began to float around, and the fairness of the proceedings grew. Governor William Phips eventually intervened, dissolving the Court of Oyer and Terminer in October 1692. By May 1693, the remaining prisoners were released. In the years following the Salem witch trials, a lot of people who were involved began to express regret, one being Judge Samuel Sewall, who publicly apologized, and the Massachusetts General Court later declared a day of fasting and soul searching for the tragedy because they realized how ridiculous it was. In 1711, a bill was passed restoring the rights and good names of those accused and granting financial restitution to their heirs. The Salem witch trials remain a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, scapegoating, and the breakdown of due process and racial tensions that still are current today. They are a significant part of American history, reflecting the complex interplay of religion, fear, and power, and in many cases just pure nonsense and lack of education. And in my opinion, many people still practice the insane beliefs that occurred in the Salem witch trials. I know for myself, when I refer to myself as a witch, people say, why would you call yourself that? And it's like, because I am. Like, I didn't choose this life. I mean, it's fine, it's okay, because many people still have the same belief, like, oh my gosh, witches are evil, witches are bad, and they're just basing this off of movies or a Bible that they barely read. There are plenty of times where people hear my business name and like, why do you call yourself a witch, or why do you have witch in the name? Because that's what it is. And one of my goals of this channel is to take away the negative connotation when it comes to witches and spirituality. So when you see the name BlaqueWitchYaya, then you see me telling you an interesting story and you just can't seem to get off my channel because you're just having so much fun, it may change your perspective of witches. I'm trying to do it one person at a time. Also, if you guys had any negative thoughts on the witches beforehand, before you tapped into spirituality and realized it's just a title that coincides with the gift that someone has, let me know, what did you think of witches below. But I'm going to read what's the first thing that pop in your mind when y'all hear the word witches, and we can start putting two and two together. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Let me know what video you would like for me to cover next. And like I always say, as above so below, as within so without, as the universe of the soul. Until next time, you guys, I shave, baby.